Hey, it's Saturday night. It's Sean Bernard and
Julius Collins.
And we are here at the Southside Studios with Sophia. Just wanted to get some alliteration going with those S's.
It's coming off well. It's certainly landing with her.
Teenage dagger eyes are upon us right now. All right.
Redirect.
So we're glad to be here at the Southside Studios, part of the Alive and Social Network. We are It Might Get Ugly. People are going to probably ask us what the hell that means. What does it mean to you? Or do you want me to start?
Well, I can start. I'll be happy to start with that. For me, it's just it's the possibility that things could get ratcheted up. When doing the normal kind of discourse, things happen. Stuff happens. And I like the idea that stuff happens, which to me could be an element of suspense. It could be an element of because frankly, I don't know how much we'll actually disagree with one another, but I do suspect that there will be times when it'll get really kind of exciting, and stuff could happen.
Well, I think we're going to push. I think you're right about that. I think we're going to push some buttons of some people, and we live in a state. I lived away from here for 6 years. So I was born here, lived away for 6 years down in Phoenix and a little time in Texas and all that, but it took for me to move back here to really recognize all the passive-aggressive stuff going on here. And so for me, it might get ugly. What it ties into is that we're going to push some buttons a little bit. And not necessarily intentionally, but that we're going to talk about things that we're passionate about. And if people want to respond to us via social media, if they want to call into the show, we're going to have that possibility. But what we mean by it might get ugly because we're going to passionately defend our position. Sometimes we may agree, sometimes we might disagree. I mean, the two of us. But it might get ugly if we take things to a place.
Well, we're certainly living in a time when things seem to be so polarized. And unfortunately, and listen, I mean this sincerely. If I had my druthers, it would be much simpler. But apparently, people are defending their position in the most ridiculous ways to the point where if you don't have kind of a passionate kind of rebuttal, then you're left kind of listening to the nonsense, and it becomes the norm.
And nonsense is all over social media, and that's the other thing is that what's become heightened in the last 6 years of social media is people clicking the share button without really thinking, especially sharing content or even just voicing their opinion without any information to back it up. But they'll share content without really thinking about how that might affect people. And part of the reason why you and I think got along right away and saw eye to eye is that I think we're pretty soulful people who do our homework and we know where we stand, we know what we believe in, and we're probably going to give you our opinion on things if you want it. Maybe if you don't want it.
Well, there you go. It's not going to be optional. Well, the option will be yours, whether to listen or not. But hopefully we'll engage in some meaningful dialogue. And where we can get to the place where we can not only express ourselves, but give people the opportunity to express themselves. And it may not necessarily be in alignment with what we're talking about or what we are asserting, but I think it's healthy to have that sort of thing. But what happens to me more often than not with social media is there's this disconnect. There's this emotional disconnect almost where people are ruthless with some of the stuff that they do and type. And to me, it's gotten to the point where it's just it's so out of hand because there's no. It feels cowardly to me because there's no face. You don't really have to actually interact with the person that you're insulting or castigating. And so I think there are obviously some really beautiful things that could be done with social media. Obviously, we're using elements of that, but some of the kind of interacting that goes on and some of the cheap shots that happen without really any research. Is a bummer. It does bum me out. The way things are parroted or regurgitated. Like, there's no way that you can possibly, if you just give 5 minutes of thought to that, believe that's true. But, there we go.
Well, and anytime anything hits nationally on social media, then you start to see, let's say it's something that's hate-based. You see that it's got 473 likes, and you're like, oh, man, really? Really? That's where we live nowadays? That's what's happening? And the funny thing is that truthfully, if you consider, that there's 350 million people in America and 6-7 billion people on the planet, really not that many people, right? You know what I mean? It's a group of people that maybe that's what their focus is. Their focus is on hate. Just like anything else, the internet can be used for love. and beautiful things, and it can be used for hate. And
Yeah, and here's where we probably don't completely align us, because I some of the biggest problem I have with that whole narrative is those people are buoyed, in my opinion, by kind of a template.
Yeah.
That suggests that this is what is norm, this is what should be right, and this is what is untoward, and this is what's, so for me, those people feel buoyed by that whole idea, and that's why that's where the arrogance comes in, because I happen to think that policies and there are too many coincidences with things of that nature, and we're not just talking economically, we're not just talking
discourse about whatever that topic is. So I'm excited about it. And beyond that, we're going to bring some beauty to this thing, because we're going to tie into some music, some spiritual elements, which for me, music is spiritual. It's
without a doubt.
Big part of my spirituality.
And I think it'll help us come to a place where people are just feel more inclined to kind of share and to offer, and because what we don't want is for people to shut down. Where at least in my mind, I'm hoping that people will open up and feel a kind of see the community element in this whole thing, and see the kind of how that can be a functional part, because on a variety of levels, I have to say.
I think you and I have lived some interesting lives based on what I know about you thus far, and so for me, I'm less interested in what you might have learned in a book than I am about what you've learned by doing, and I think that that's part of what we're going to bring to the table here, is that this is going to be about what we see, what we feel, what we think, and what we know based on what we've seen. And so part of that will, I think part of what will unravel here is an education process. But hopefully people will find that we're honest in our thought and our opinion, and that they'll feel that this thing's got a pretty fun vibe to it as well.
Because I think quite possibly the worst thing that could happen is that we could be nonstop serious and... And I don't know that I'm even built that way.
I'm not.
But
either.
I think a lot of really beautiful things are solved, or at least discussed over laughter, and laughter kind of helps. Food helps. I'm looking for all of those mediums to kind of like blend together and help us to just get to the core of whatever it is that we're discussing. And frankly, what the heck is that going to be? I don't know, but I'm excited about the possibilities.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited and looking forward to working with you. I think I want to spend a couple minutes about just on you and your background and what you've done, and I think it's important for us to maybe interview each other a little bit,
I like
so
it.
that the audience gets to know us and helps us get to know each other even better. We were introduced through a mutual friend, and I thought I had seen you perform a few times, which was great. Certainly, we must have a kindred feeling about music, because I've seen you sing.
Well, the more I hear about your hangout joints, I'm finding that we're a lot more kindred than one might even guess.
Well, we were in the same place at the same time a few times,
more than once,
without knowing it, and then you find out you end up sitting on a podcast with somebody years later. So tell me a little bit about, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Waterloo, Iowa. I was born in Chicago.
Okay.
And I was born into some chaos, just a great deal of chaos. My family is, has some issues. Dysfunctional on a lot of levels. But my mother, I don't know how much of this I'd like to share on radio, but
that's up to you.
My mother fell in love with brothers, and my older brothers were conceived and were kidnapped, and then I was conceived, and it created just a real divide in the family. And so my mother and I left and lived on the street for a while, and then she put me in a foster home when I was just a young lad, a year and a half old. So I grew up in the foster care system as a ward of the state of Iowa, which is where we ended up out of Chicago. Yeah. And I, for the most part, it was a pretty basic, normal, I use that word loosely, but, for foster care kind of situation. I mean, I went to school, was a very religious kind of existence. And I left there when I was a teenager to go to Atlanta to go to school. I went to Music Business Institute out there and down there. And a couple years after that, I was working in a nightclub called Rupert's, and there was one here in Minneapolis. Yeah. And I was working in the Rupert's nightclub, and I was just like a 22-year-old kid.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the servers and a few of the bartenders were from the original club here in Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just got to be friends with a lot of these people. And they're like, you got to go to Minneapolis. You just got to, it's your kind of people. It's your kind of, Atlanta was getting old for me. It's so transient and it's so sprawling. And so it takes forever to get everywhere.
Yeah,
and,
it does,
and I just, the heat got oppressive to the point where I was just like, I can't take this anymore. And so, some friends, if we get you a plane ticket to Minneapolis, will you just go check it out? And I had no real interest in coming back to the Midwest. I could only think about snow. But I came and checked it out, and the very first day I was in town, I left Atlanta. It was like 90 degrees and 100 humidity. It was just ridiculous. And then I came here, it was May, and it was like 65, 60 degrees.
What year was it?
This was 91.
Okay.
May of 91, and it was like the arts fair was going on in Uptown. I was like, this is awesome. This is my kind of place. And that very night I went down, they said, you got to go see the Mambo's Combo, which is the main reason why I came to town. So I went down, and I'll never forget that walk down Washington Avenue in front of Bunkers, because there were like 16 Harleys in front of. I was like, where in the hell are y'all taking me? I'm not going in this place and getting lynched.
Yeah.
They're like, trust me, Juice, you're going to love this place. And we go inside, and honestly, it was, I don't know how to describe it. It was like it was the closest thing to a utopian kind of existence I had ever seen. I walk in, there's black people, there's white people, there's straight people, there's gay people, there's people in tie-dye, there's people in suits, there's brothers in fedoras, and there's Prince and Sheila E. And I'm like,
they were there,
and at the
time?
bar, the bar's lined with bikers. So
Yeah.
it was like it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, and all these people were here to see this band, who appeared to not give a crap about anything. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen, because at that time, the Combo was a musician's band. I mean, so they didn't do a lot of sucking up to the audience. It wasn't really their thing.
Studio quality musicians.
Oh,
I mean, absolutely.
The best. And listen, I mean this sincerely. The more I get out of Minneapolis, the more I realize the musicians in Minnesota are like no other. I mean, you can take them over New York musicians, L.A. musicians, any day of the week. And believe me, when you go out there and you see session work get done, and how much quality comes out of this area and how much session work, it's astonishing. I have a friend who plays drums with the Combo, Michael Bland. Yeah. And whenever he goes out to L.A., musicians show up just to watch him cut. They just show up.
Great?
It's a work ethic. And I think here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, I just think people treat the arts like a mechanic might treat his craft or a carpenter.
Yeah.
They just work their craft and they're just better at it. And granted, what are you going to do? You know, that 5 months when it's freezing cold,
Yeah.
you're going to get better at playing the guitar. You're
Yeah.
going to get better at whatever it is that you do. And frankly, there's a real community here where it's incestuous. It's incestuous in a good way. It's just
2 degrees of separation. That's
yeah,
what I've
everybody's
said.
pretty much playing with everybody
Yeah.
on some level or another, and Prince is kind of like the person who is. But I was astonished to walk into this biker bar, and there's Prince sitting in with this band. That, by the way, I had never heard anything that good in my life. There was just silence for 3 minutes between songs where one guy is playing with his strings and one guy's yelling at his deck, and all of a sudden the band starts playing, and all's forgiven. I'm like, oh my God. And so I was in that band 6 months. That night I sat with the band, and I called my wife, and I said, baby, we're moving to Minnesota. We're moving to Minnesota.
blows you back.
I just had a feeling like I've never had before playing music. And
If you live in this area, in the Twin Cities in the Midwest, and you have not seen the combo, you got to see the combo. If you don't live in this area, you travel to this area, you got to go see the combo.
Yeah.
Sundays and Mondays still, right, at Bunkers?
that's right. And there's a reason why they're Prince's favorite band. They're just really good. And listen, there have been a couple incarnations over the years, but the main people are there. The people who and these are 3 people who have been really instrumental in my existence here in the Twin Cities. Billy Franzi is my favorite musician. Margaret Cox is my favorite singer. I mean, she's got no equal, man. She's just the baddest. She's the goofiest thing you've ever met. She's just the quintessential Minnesotan, blue-eyed, blonde-haired kind of, and she's kind of a goofball. And all of a sudden she starts to sing, and it's like, what the hell is going on
She
here?
can wail. Yeah.
It's not just it's technique. I've seen her in studio situations. I've seen her live. She's just the smartest, most versatile thinker as a singer I've ever been around. And Michael Bland is the reason why I moved here. I came and I sat in with the band that night, and he's like this big 400-pound man.
He's a big fella.
And he
Yeah.
stands up and, what's your name? And I was like, my name is Julius. Everybody calls me Juice. He's like, you want to move? You want to start a rock band? And I was like, I think I do. I do. I was like the Jedi mind trick. Suddenly I was a Minnesota resident in a few months. So
Greasy Meal started, and we should mention that you were the lead vocalist in Greasy Meal. And
yeah. Greasy Meal is kind of a child of the combo, because the combo was kind of an irreverent kind of musical outfit where they play, and really well, I might say. At least initially they play Mike Stern. They play, they play all kinds of crazy jazz stuff at the top of the gig, and then they play, Joe Cocker and Sly and the Family all through. And it's like, I can't believe this. So Greasy Meal, initially we just booked 4 Sundays at the Caboose, and we're just going to play a bunch of stuff that we loved, musicians love, music lovers love, deep cuts on records, and thinking that, who cares? We're just going to make ourselves happy. Well, after the 3rd week, there were 300 people in the bar, and we're like, maybe we should do this a little bit longer. And it became kind of this thing to do on Sunday nights. I mean, there were, for 5 years, 1,000 people every Sunday night at the Caboose, and it was like a little bit of a circus. I mean, we'd bring a couch on stage and made it an interactive kind of you can come up on stage and chill if you want and see the band from a different. What I liked about that whole thing was it kind of immediately tore down the wall between the audience and the performers, and then it just became we're all the performers on some level, and people really kind of seemed to really get in that. We'd feed them, throw burritos out, but Greasy Meal is our musical outfit, and we still we play not as frequently as we used to, but we still get it done.
Well, I can't wait to see you at your next show. It's been years since I've seen the band, so I can't wait to be able to do that. We're going to jump into a couple of other things here in a little bit, but right now we're going to take a little break, and we will be right back with It Might Get Ugly with Juice and Sean B.